every athlete wants to get faster, but when should you actually focus on speed training? Today, I've got Coach Czar back on the show to talk about the long term athlete development framework and how it connects to speed specifically, and what you should really be doing at your age to run faster. Coach Czar is the founder of Czar Athletics, which is Oklahoma's first certified universal speed rating lab. He's trained many athletes on how to build real measurable speed. And so, today we're really going to dive into how do you build speed, but like how do you do it in an age appropriate way? Because there's a lot of fluff out there, there's a lot of nonsense out there, but then there's also a lot of good stuff. So we're going to kind of sift through that. So for the athletes listening, like really tune into what is it that you need to focus on right now with your age, with where you're at. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. So, Coach, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be back on. I think this is a great topic to get started with because of there's always a lot of questions about when should I get my kids started, and when is too early, when is too late, and what we would like to do is kind of narrow that down for the athletes and the parents.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I want to start off with, though, is, one of the big reasons I wanted to do this episode was talking about that long-term athlete development as a whole. And if you guys like don't know what that is, literally can Google it. That's what I did. And you have these little tables or figures, whatever you want to call them, that like kind of break it down age by age. But what I want to ask you, Coach, is like, are those still relevant? Are those ages still appropriate? Because I see, even though you see those ages, I think we're kind of the way that our culture is shifting, that those expectations are getting earlier and earlier.
Yes, it is, and we want to talk about when do I get my athletes started? What is appropriate? And you'll hear a lot of pro athletes say, "I want my kids to play multiple sports." Right. So let's not even get into the sports realm of it. Let's talk about uh, the kid themselves. At a young age, we want them to be able to move. So we want them to be a good general athlete and be able to play any sport. So if you want to be an athlete first, you want to be able to move first, you want to be able to be fast first and strong enough to to experiment with what sport you like. And that's how it used to be growing up back in my day. We'd be outside and we'd come up with all kinds of games, and that's that imaginative play. And if you want to break it down, we always talk about a book that I've read before, USA Weightlifting Programming, a winning coach's guide, Bob Takano, I believe. He's a Hall of Fame weightlifting coach, and he talks about the process of acquiring sports mastery. So to me, that's all the same as long-term athletic development. So just a different acronym, PASM, process of acquiring sports mastery. And he breaks it down into three parts: motor skill development. So that's just the brain and how can the athlete see things and visualize and learn and make his limbs do what it needs to do to participate in a sport or problem solve. The next is general physical preparation. Can the athlete, pull, push, run, jump, skip, push, all those types of things. And then the third part would be when they're in their significant strength training phase, which is, basically puberty. When they start to hit puberty, that's when you want to hit the weights, right? Now you can put load on them because they know how to move as they're aging. And so those are the type three kind of things that he breaks it down into, and it's real simple and quick. And I would lean to that more because it's so general that parents can understand that faster, instead of a kid buying a $500 baseball bat, get that kid some general training, learning how to run, learning how to stop on a dime, learning how to cut, learning how to climb. And, parents always tell me the playground, I'm just going to take my kids to the playground. Please do, but be consistent with it. Let them be out there playing and playing with other kids, play tag, whatever. Those are great alternatives than taking them to a coach. So
Yeah. Well, and I like that framework too, because I mean, you mentioned the strength piece of it, of like, okay, and I had another guy named Patrick on the podcast recently, and he talks about ninth grade, 10th grade, etc., like getting more of the more of in the weight room basically, and some of those things, which there are some elements that could be done even in middle school, but it's helping them learn how to freaking move, like, and move properly. One thing that I see a lot is like, just, I mean, squats, for example. I see a lot of athletes who their squats are very, or like younger kids, like in general, we just aren't really taught how to properly squat, but it's like, or we were trained out of it. I think that's more of the issue, because you also see like young kids, like the 4-year olds or the 5-year olds, they squat and they actually squat usually pretty good. Like a lot of them actually squat like, and so I think it's just helping them learn it properly, but just, yeah, just that foundation.
Absolutely. And I always kind of go back to caveman days or evolution. Cavemen had to hunt, gather. They didn't have any tools. They had their hands. They made tools. And so, and then we fast forward to today, everything is so easy. Kids today sit down all day. So what's weak on them when they're sitting down? Their hips. That they're just we're sitting all day. And so that's why people started inventing, walking treadmills and standing up at your desk, this pop-up desks that raise up so you can work while standing. Those are all good ideas, but that's still not even close to the effectiveness of we can get in just an hour of 45 minutes of real intentful training even at those young ages, or just the recess time, actually making kids intentfully move during recess. All that stuff can happen at school, and it's really important that we continue that. It's just getting harder and harder with the tablet and technology. It just makes it hard for kids to really learn and consume content. Again, the tablet also has its own drawbacks. It's a dopamine hit. That's what I've been reading lately. And so when I get kids after school, I kind of have to wake them up and snap them out of it. And I have to be overly engaging. But we want the kids to start learning and understand that, and the parents to help them, limit that screen time before they come here, before their sporting events, and so they can be well rested and perform at their highest levels.
Yeah. Yeah, so when you talk about just like that natural movement, yeah, I mean, the recess time, a lot of those things, like, definitely, I think, again, I think we forget a lot of that. The thing that I think a lot of families, athletes struggle with is when they should focus on speed development, like in terms of how to move, how to make sure your form is good. Like, when does that come into play? And would you say it maybe depends on the athlete or even depends on the sport?
It always depends, and that's the fun part of sports. Every athlete, that's what I like to tell parents. Every athlete's journey is different. One athlete will peak early in sixth grade, and then that's it. And then some will peak way later. And that's what we talk about. If you give them the skills now, as early as you can, if you know that's what they want to do, which involves running and sprinting and stopping, I always say do it early. Because one, that's a skill that they'll carry the rest of their lives. Sprinting should be a natural response to danger. So we should all have that skill. We forget how to do that because, especially as we get into my age, 48 years old, uh, we don't sprint that often, if ever. And so we want the kids to learn how to do that the earliest as possible, because it requires zero equipment, and it's the highest physiological stimulus that any athlete can go through. And if you try to sprint, you can't sprint for like 10 seconds right from the start. You just can't. You're going to slow down immensely. So and then your form is going to break down. So we want to teach those kids as early as possible. But there are steps to that. We don't just get them in here and just sprint. We'll let them run, and then they think it's sprinting, but we'll break it down and try to bring them back up, or break their form down and build it up. We don't destroy kids and say you're doing it wrong or whatever. We break them down into drills, and we hope that it translates later into runs, into their run. And it's a long process. So that's why it's called long-term athletic development. It takes a long time for them to understand how to lift your leg up and hit the ground with the right force properly in the correct direction to maintain a certain speed or even accelerate. So it's a long process, and the longer they do it, the more they do it, it just becomes part of their nature, as it should be. And it happens so fast when they actually get it. and then they'll plateau, right? And then it's like, that's okay. You're going to plateau. You're going to go up and down. And that's why we keep data so that they can see year after year after year. You could see their data go from 15 to 16 miles an hour. And then the next year, the scale is at 16 to 17. And it does. It takes a year's time to actually move 1 mile per hour faster as you age, as you mature. But then when you get to that 15, 16 age, or 14, 15, 16, it really, really goes up if they're continuously training consistently and correctly.
So I want to touch on something that I think is really important for the athletes to hear, because you mentioned, yeah, it may take a year for you to even just like change a mile per hour type of thing, like even just like small increments like that. Versus when you do strength training, like in a couple weeks, you might be able to hit 5, 10 extra pounds, on certain things, and you see that improvement a little bit more. What would be your advice to the athlete who feels like they're not gaining speed to continue that training? Like, yeah, how can they handle that?
To let them know ahead of time that there's going to be peaks and valleys and plateaus. You can even go back to show clips of high level coaches that talk about it with their athletes, and they always load them. They always talk about load. Are you there's so many factors that involve sprinting. Were you well nourished that day? The day you do sprint, were you well rested that day? Is there something on your mind? Or do you have a nagging injury? All those things play a factor in actually your output, your performance, and that's what we want to measure it. And then that's why we want to ask those questions. Did you eat well? Did you have water? Are you hydrated? If you're not hydrated, you're just not going to fire on all cylinders. Period. Dot. It's just not going to work. So those types of things is why we keep data, and it's why we also want to get a lot of data points so we can actually see a trend. Uh, Seeing kids 2 times a week is really hard to build a trend unless it's over a long period of time. And thankfully I do have a lot of athletes, or quite a few athletes, that have stayed with me for years, and they only come once or twice a week, and I do have those data points. And it's good to see that if they're consistent and you can see the trends when they're in season, they don't just plateau, they dip.
Mhm.
And then when they get off their season or they become less busy, you could see a spike. And it really reemphasizes the importance of a routine, consistency, and all of everything that you do.
Mm. Uh, okay, that just filed into another off question, but I think is important. Is you mentioned speed going down in season. Now I understand like strength going down in season because I mean a lot of times they're not eating enough and maybe not lifting much, if at all. Why does speed go down during the season?
Because it's the quality that loses its effectiveness, minimum effective dose. So if you
Mm,
don't sprint within 5 to 7 days, you get slower right away. Whereas if your aerobic capacity, you might lose that capacity in 2 to 3 weeks. Uh, Around those numbers, I'd have to look at the actual facts on that. But for speed, I do know it's 5 to 7 days.
mm,
So that is why if you don't hit your certain threshold, your minimum threshold that you've been hitting, and you don't intentfully train for it, you will go down in speed. And that's been proven. And that was a study during COVID, trying to get athletes back into playing after having a long break. They started noticing injuries. What's the trend? What's going on here? And that was one of the trends that they saw, that speed is lost between 5 to 7 days. And so we want to be able to sprint them regularly in season at the minimum.
yeah. So what about like, because I think about a sport like football or I mean kind of baseball, but I think football is more useful in this context. Is they do a lot of sprinting in a sense. It's not or it's not in a controlled setting, but how does that compare?
For football players, they run plays, and their plays are between 5 to 15 yards normally. So if you want to get into maximal sprinting, you're going to need a longer runway,
Mm,
right? So we talk about at least 20 plus yards. So that's what we're talking about. So they're not getting the last 30 to 40 yards of sprinting. So that is lost during the season. And when sometimes when they go into conditioning and they tell them to sprint 100 yards, they're already fatigued.
Mm.
So they're trying to sprint at a degraded state. So they're not going to get the adaptations that they want because of the brain is not going to let you do it because it's not fresh. It's not at capacity.
Yeah. So, sorry, we're definitely veering off the long-term athlete development a little bit here, but I think again, I think about so in season, you mentioned like trying to do speed training in season, but there's also the talk of trying to do strength training in season. And so how do you I guess yeah, how do you balance that with all of the practices and stuff?
To me, that is the fun part of it. As the coach, it's a problem to solve, and it works if you collaborate.
Mm,
Understand the athlete's needs, output needs, understand what they've gone through throughout the week, and understand what is it that you're trying to accomplish. When you do that, you can set up a program, and we talk about minimum effective dosage. Or what is it that we need to effectively hit the stimulus so we can keep where we're at from all the work that we did in the summer to actually keep the gains that we have so we can actually perform on game day. That is a complex problem. And that's what we talk about integrating with high performance teams horizontally. But with the strength coach, they're at the bottom, right? They started at the foundation. They're the foundation. So they don't have to do it that way. They could, I'm gonna build them up. I want them 100% fast, and I want them 80% in condition. And then as the season goes, then coaches will start running them and get them in condition for their sport because their practices should mimic the sport. That's
mm,
how they get conditioned. And then now it's my job or the strength coach's job to manage that. Like, all right, hey, he's running too much. I've watched him uh, a lot of college teams have GPS
yeah.
trackers, and they green light him. He's green, he's good to go. Red, yellow, whatever. And like, hey, he's had a lot of yards piled up during the week, and he hasn't sprinted, and he's degraded right now. Don't work him as much. So that's how they kind of really micromanage their load management. It's
Yeah.
tough. And so let's go back to long-term development, right? So
Yes.
we kind of want to do that for the long term for the young kids. We want them to be able to run, jump, skip, have those coordination skills consistently even in season. Because what are they doing all the time? And what we're trying to do also is minimize chronic injuries from chronic overuse movements. So
Mm,
sprinting is going to break that up as well. Learning how to run, jump, skip, push, pull, lift, carry, all of those things are they're all kind of not related, but they're all going to improve the athlete's performance if we consistently do them. Same thing with managing their load. So at the little youth athlete development stage, it has to be again the minimum effective dose. We want to find out what the minimum is and not go over the maximum and really balance out the athlete. That's what
mm,
we want. And that's what we always talk about general physical preparedness.
yeah. So what does that look like for somebody who's like 11, 12, 13? Especially
Okay.
those who do travel ball or do club or do all these different things. Like what does that look like for them?
So what it looks like for them, they have to at least, in my opinion, find one day a week to do something that does not look like their sport.
Mm,
Something that does not look like their sport. I like it when a baseball player also plays soccer, and I've seen that, and they're better athletes.
mm,
They can run, jump, and skip. They're tired probably more mentally, but probably not because they're having fun playing that other sport. So it breaks up the monotony, the boredom, and that's what we want the weight training and the sprinting to be. We want it to be fun. We want them to play games. We want them to chase. We want them to solve problems that they don't even know that they're solving. The game and the sport should be fun at that age. And it's on us as coaches to make it interesting for them so that they can actually consume and do it on their own. And that's what I try to tell the parents. I understand it's hard to do these drills on your own, but it's so important that you do. And you don't need to spend 30 minutes doing it. 5 minutes. 5 minutes of doing some starts, some A series drills, some dribbling drills, some skips, athletic skips, power skips, power jumps. It's gonna pay off dividends. And that's what I love about basketball players. If you know a hooper, he walks down the hallway, has an invisible basketball through his leg, and then he goes up and he slams the top of the door. Those types, that means he's thinking about it, he's dreaming about it, he's visualizing. That's what we want with our kids. If you think about and that's why I don't like people saying, "Hey man, my son is slow." Don't say that. He just doesn't know how to run yet. We don't know if he's slow or not. Let's see. He might be, physically slow, but when you tell kids that and put that out there in the world, they start to believe it. I don't
Yeah.
want them to believe it. I want them to dream, and that's what we play sports for. We want that glory, that freeze frame moment, that you kick the winning goal, those types of things. And so we're all dreamers. Coaches, we all probably used to be athletes. We all dream about that moment. I relive it through all my athletes.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it. It's fun
Yeah.
to be connected to sports.
No, 100%. Yeah, and I think it's like you said, like them just naturally falling into it, because I think a lot of us really struggle with our heads, as you mentioned, like if we put those things out there, like that becomes more of our realities really. It's like, "Oh yeah, it's going to be a bad day." Like, "Yeah, it's going to be a bad day. You just said it." Like so that
100.
I always use that as an example. So, um I want to shift up in age too. So if we look at the middle school athletes, so 13 kind of starts middle school ish, but going into like 15-ish years old, what is that? How does that look differently than that 11 to 13?
And so it depends. If that kid has never had played sports, to me that's easier,
Mm.
right? Because then I get to mold him. He's just clay, and then at that age, I tell him, "You're not going to do anything wrong. You're just learning." And we want, again, they're going to learn faster if they're not afraid to mess up. And that's why on my doors it says, "Through these doors, be unafraid of failure." Do not worry about messing up. Let me worry about it, right? You don't need two people beating you up. And so we want that to be the building block. Hey, we're just going to do something simple. We're going to do one thing. We're going to lift our leg up, but I want you to be tall. I want you to be, all these things, all these cues, and we have to teach them the verbiage. But it's easier when it's those athletes. And the easiest kids, and here now I'm gonna go backwards. Baseball players, baseball coaches do a great job of coaching. I don't want to bash parents and baseball players, because they, in my experience, they are the easiest to teach because they are so detail oriented. And if they were just detail oriented about their general physical prep, how much more amazing would they be? And I just think they don't really see that whole picture yet. And that's our job, to educate them. But they are the most simplest to teach. Like, I tell them, "Hey, I want you to do this." Like, "So you just want me to go up and down?" "Yes, I just want you to go just squat down." "Yes." Because they do all this rotation, they have to have their wrists involved. So anything with the handle, with a stick, is a highly skilled sport. Tennis, golf, those are really hard. Baseball, really hard sports, and highly skilled. And so those are the athletes that are easiest to coach and teach. Football players in my experience, are the hardest, because they think
Yeah.
everything is brute force. And so when I get those kids, it depends on the sport, depends on their experience level, but we always want to make sure that they are good movers first, no matter what. So it's always, no matter what, the default is GPP. Can they generally perform general tasks? Can they lift? Can they squat down? Can they pull? Can they push? Can they jump? Can they skip? If they can't do any of those things, we have a lot of work to do at those ages. And that's okay though, because they actually kind of learn faster, because they can actually retain information much more. Their brains are more developed than, say, an 8-year-old kid. And so, but that's the challenge. And that's the fun part of being a coach, finding the kid and see them where they started and where they end. That is the magic of it. That's the beauty of it. And the kids gain so much more confidence when they take a picture or a video of themselves and say, "Look what I did, coach. Remember when I was slow?" That is the best part. And I had a long distance runner show me that the other day. He sent a text. He said, "This was me last year during my kick on on an easy course. This is my kick now on a harder course that was really hilly. Like my shoulders are relaxed, my hip is up, my toes pointed forward. Uh, I have great posture here." I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I always tell them that's all you, because you actually listen and consume the content and put in the work. And nothing, no one can take that away from me, no matter what. And that's the beauty of it. And again, he says he's only been with me for a few months, but again, he's going to be a senior. He's a senior. Those few months at that age can help out a lot.
Yeah.
Consistent training for those few months. And now just imagine if he had been with me since he was in 8th grade. I don't know where he would be, right? We will never know. And to switch gears to say, let's say like a long distance runner, he used to be fast. And then what I found out is a lot of those long distance runners used to be soccer players. What do soccer players do? They sprint and
Mhm.
change directions. And so they have acceleration qualities. So they have higher top end speed. But as they age and continue on and they move past soccer and they could focus on their 5K, their long distance running, they don't sprint as much and they plateau really, really hard. And they wonder why they can't sprint or why they're not as fast as they used to be. Well, I would tell them it's because you stopped sprinting. You know, um, to me, it just makes sense.
Yeah, I really, highlighting some of the things that you've emphasized, like number one, you mentioned it's easier when they haven't played a sport when you're talking about like the middle school age and then the emphasis on multi-sport athletes, which I also agree with. And that's where even the book that I'm putting out, like they're multi-sport athletes, like I'm highlighting that. But the thing that I want to give you a challenge here is because what we see in our culture right now in the sports culture, we see the baseball players play year round, basketball players play year round, soccer players play year round, football players are starting to play year round. And I'm sure you could list that in pretty much any sport versus doing the multi-sport. How would you handle in terms of that long-term athlete development if they're already 16 to 18 and they've been doing that for 5, 10 years? How do you handle that athlete when it comes to long-term athlete development and the speed?
So that's where I really suggest them to come see me,
Mhm.
because then I break up that boredom. I get them into positions that they are not used to and find weaknesses and try to find improvement in those weaknesses and turn them into strengths. Robustness, I like to use. Um, I have that problem now. My son, my 11-year-old, he plays basketball year round. And sometimes I have to force him to not play. And the general rule for me about youth development, when it comes to youth development, I got this from a docu series on ESPN Plus. Daniel Coyle. So the show's called Enhanced, and the episode's called Skills. Great episode. Watch it. He talks. One of the physical therapists. They were talking about chronic injuries with youth athletes, overuse injuries, and he talks about the equation I use is I don't do more. If my son is 11, I do not do 11 hours or more
Mm,
in a week. And I like that. I like that number. So if he's 8, he's not going to do 8 hours of work during the week. So my son's 11. I make sure he doesn't go over 11 hours of sports. Sometimes I include games, sometimes I don't. If he's having fun, if it's 3 games, but if he plays 3 games in one weekend, that's a lot. So I
mhm,
kind of shorten his week up a little bit, but I make sure he doesn't go over that 11.
mm,
And then obviously you have to know your athlete, know your child. Are they lethargic? Are they tired? Are they getting what they need? And for goodness sakes, take them off the tablets. Minimize the tablets. Do other things. So I have my son play. He practices piano, and for goodness sakes, he hates it. He hates it, hates it, hates it. But he can play the piano, and that's good for him. He's got to do something really hard that he doesn't want to do, and he has to use his brain, and he doesn't have to really see the keys. He has to read the notes and do it. That is long-term athletic development, making them do stuff that they don't want to do and challenge them. And yeah, he doesn't like it, but he's learning discipline, in my
mm.
opinion. And then after that, he gets to go do what he wants. Except be on the tablet.
Okay. Yeah, I just think about, again, like as you talk about on a movement perspective, I think it's important on the development aspect because I mean there's the burnout, there's all those things we can unpack. But like yeah, just on the movement aspect of like, okay, if you've played only baseball for the last 10 years, you have very, very similar movement or like repetitive movement patterns. And you see the UCL injuries, you see a lot of things with that. And then, basketball, same thing. And then, a lot of them have the ankle or the knee issues. And yeah, just like all of them have these specific things that when you're doing it over and over and over again, and especially when they're so game focused, like so many of them are, like you said, playing 3 games or more in a weekend, and it's like baseball, football, or sorry, baseball, basketball, soccer, all are doing that. Even high school seasons, I know down in Florida, a lot of their high school season overlaps with club season. I'm like, why? Like,
Why? I agree. Why? And I think we kind of know why. Money, right? The parents are going to pay money for their development. Um, it's hard to tell your kid no if they really want to do it, which I encourage. But we also need to put limits on it. Like I just said, my son only does 11 hours in a week. I and uh, what is her name? She's got her own podcast. Erica Mulholland, I believe, Hall of Fame
mm-hmm.
soccer player,
Yep.
and she talks about female soccer players playing too much of their sport and not sprinting enough. And she's not talking about the high school, she's talking about all of them. And that they are more prone to ACL injuries because they don't know how to change directions. They don't know how to move as well because they do one thing, they stop and go and they kick. And that's really, and they don't just kick though, they kick in awkward positions. So they're in more of an awkward position than most people are, than most athletes are. Uh, if you've ever seen a soccer game and you'll see 3 people kick at one ball, they're in awkward positions. And they're not really low to where their center mass is safe for them to be at those angles with their knees and ankles or the torque. It's dangerous. So those are the things that we have to educate the kids and parents on. We highly suggest they need to be good movers. If they're high quality movers, they're going to be great athletes. So we talked about those stages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Motor development, general physical prep, which doesn't necessarily mean strength training, right? General physical prep means you want to load them, but load them into movements to make them move better. And then when they get to that age, puberty age, then we add in the significant strength training, right? For you, if you were to break up their diets for that those stages, how would you do it?
Yeah. So
Because
in
that's
the
that's what I need to know so I could give that to the parents.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So nutrition wise, age development wise, I think there's two pieces of this. There's the eating part of it, and then there's the prepping part of it. I'll start with the prepping one because that one goes a little bit faster and easier. So prepping wise, like I mean, age appropriate. You don't necessarily need your 10-year-old using knives or 12-year-old even potentially, but like I mean, some of them are pretty impressive. I know there's some child chefs out there, but but I think just getting them more and more involved in that middle school age of as simple as, making their lunches, doing their breakfast, like starting to enable them there, because if they get into those habits when they have to wake up early for high school, that's the biggest complaint I get from athletes with breakfast is like they don't have time or they don't know how or they don't have the energy. Like heck, like I just had a client call, like a new client call who's a sophomore who doesn't know how to make eggs. And so, which granted, I'll be honest, I did not know either. Like at that age, I'm pretty confident I did not know how. But just that idea of like, okay, like helping them understand some of those basic things, like they don't need to be necessarily handling dinner yet, but like breakfast, lunch, some of those things. And as they get through at high school, like doing more of that. On the nutrition side of things, I think there's two things is number one, making sure that not just simply eating more or eating in general, but eating more often. Because a lot of them go these long, long gaps between eating. And I think that should be the first step in, really just with any of them. As soon as they start being more active and they're doing sports regularly, helping them understand like, no, you need to eat more often, like that, as simple as that. And helping them understand that it's not just one macro, it's carbs or protein. Like, if they naturally gravitate towards a protein bar, okay, have an apple with it. if they naturally gravitate towards applesauce like my nephew does, then hey, let's combine it with the protein. Unless it's pre-workout, pre-workout can kind of do the applesauce, but I think some of that is okay. You're kind of leading the charge, or maybe you have for the parents, maybe for those younger kids, you have different bins in the pantry of, okay, you're grabbing these types of things, or you have a little sheet and you have ideas. Like I've got those types of sheets for my sister has a sheet in her pantry that I made. Yeah, but it's like progressively getting them more and more involved with it, even if it's as simple as choosing. So starting out at the younger ages, like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't work under 12, so I'm less experienced on that end, but I have my nephews at least. But I'd say getting them more involved in that aspect. Then we get into, I mean, 13, 14, 15. Again, I think they can be handling, I was handling my own breakfasts probably in fourth or fifth grade, honestly, and lunch. Granted, my breakfast was usually cereal, but uh, yeah, a lot of those types of things. And I think at that age, the 13, 14, 15, it shouldn't just be you telling them as a parent, telling them what to do. At 13, 14, 15, even 12, they need to understand why they are doing it. This is the biggest mistake parents make is they don't talk about why. They just say, do this. And I'm like, why? Like kids want to know why. They need to understand why because they don't have 20, 30, 40 years of experience like you do. They have a couple years, maybe, they have very little experience. So if we can teach them the why behind it of like, oh, hey, like grab an applesauce because that's going to give you energy for your workout. Okay, great. Like that, there's a connection there. Um, but then also helping them understand like, okay, if you just bring chips, applesauce, basically a bunch of like carbs basically for lunch or for even a snack, like how does your energy feel an hour later? Oh, I feel like I need to eat again, or I feel, like tired. It's like, okay, well then we need to combine that with some other foods. And so just even if it's an awareness piece of helping them understand those components, I wouldn't, I mean, it's hard with the fruits and veggies. Like, I mean, fruits are an easy one. Veggies can be a little bit harder to get them on board with, but I think the more that they are around the veggies, even if they're picky eater and not quite ready, that they can, have that expectation. But um, I think really the first thing that parents of athletes and athletes need to be doing is just understanding that they need to eat more and hydrate more, and then after that, that's what I call my high school level or high school to college level nutrition. And then once you get more to the college to D1, it's understanding when I should be eating what types of foods, like more carbs pre workout, protein and carbs post workout, like some of those things. Like I feel like middle schoolers can handle that. We don't teach middle schoolers that, but I think they can handle that. And then high school level is which would be more the D1 pro level, is understanding, okay, it's not just about protein. It's not just about calories. It's about, how can I recover faster on the fruits and the veggies? Fish is going to help me with this thing, like that type of stuff they can expand on. But yeah, it was a lot longer of an answer than I was initially planning. But I think it's steps. I apply it as high school, college, D1 level nutrition because that's what we see it as. We see the general colleges, they just learn to eat more and eat more protein. But then you see the D1 level universities, they have dietitians, they have cafeterias for the athletes, and they have all of the quality aspects in there. They have more
Yeah,
of the,
it's all catered to me. Yep,
yeah.
100%.
And
So
so I
so
think,
my question so my next question is, so we went through middle school to high school. So this could be a gap that you could probably fill, educating the parents on the travel ball families, right? What can they do better to prepare their kids' meals if they're on a weekend playing 4 games on one day, playing another game on Sunday, and then driving back in the car, not just eating junk?
mhm,
What are tactics for those families? I think that's an education gap right there because I see it all the time. My wife does a great job. She's kind of a nerd. She does all the kind of things that you do. She has snack bins and she has them labeled. She's excellent. She used to meal prep for my son. He would just take it and throw it away.
mhm.
He would just eat cereal and throw it away, just because he had his stomach out of for whatever reason. Not to
Yeah.
blame him or anything like that, like he was being nefarious or anything, but it's just their kids. And we understand that kids are going to be kids. But for the parents, how could they be better at that during those stages, those crucial stages of motor development, motor skill development, that age? That
Yeah.
one's hard to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think for that, it's helping. I mean, I'll give my sister as an example. Like, she will tell them to pack certain snacks, like even at those younger ages, like at the 8, 9, 10. My younger nephew's now 11, and just to be like, hey, grab snacks from that bin, or grab, certain things. And so they
My
grab
wife
the
does it.
apple sauces or the fruit bars or whatever. And so I think just helping them understand, like making sure that those things are being packed, whether it be the parent packing them or the athlete, but then just helping them, and this is where I have visuals that I use with my athletes of like, okay, if you have an hour to 2 hour gap, these are the types of things we should focus on. If you only have less than 30 minutes between games or whatever, then it's like, okay, just quit carbs. Not ideal, but it's at least something to get their energy to continue going. And so I think, again, that goes back to just focusing on helping them get enough, and not just carbs and not just protein, but both, making sure that those are being incorporated. And then, I mean, fast food guides, like I have a fast food guide, I have a free one, and I have a very extensive one that's like low cost, like a couple dollars, whatever. But it's also, teaching the same things of in the when it comes to the fast food on the road, making sure they understand, like, okay, these things are, think about how you feel after you eat pizza. Like, do you want to feel like that when you play a game? No. Okay, well, like, let's save that for after the game. Like, not ideal, but it's better than before the game, and so just kind of, I think it's just awareness. Kids are not aware of their bodies, hence why they need development on that side too. And so I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, and the parents, I think sometimes the parents don't understand because we're so
Yes.
far removed from that age. I don't know what it's like to be 11. Like, oh, we always think, oh, they just have so much energy. I can't wait for them to go to bed. Well, I think sometimes parents think that way when they're going through their games, and they're like, you should have more energy. Why are you dragging? But if we're not here, you're hyper, and it's because they're thinking really hard when they're playing. They're really, they should be invested. And so we need to replenish that. And I think a lot of parents don't think of it that way as well.
Yeah.
So I think the parents need the education at that age because it's not like the 8-year-old can go out and buy his own meals.
Yeah. 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 I do have a parent membership, and I include it with my athlete stuff, but for the parents who want support and their athletes are not ready for that kind of support, again, under 12 typically for me, then I have like a parent thing where I have monthly calls, and I have resources and things that you can start equipping your athletes on. So that's something too that we can always talk about. If you guys want, like, just feel free to reach out to me. My links are everywhere, so we can always connect there.
Perfect.
But I do want to ask one last quick question. I know we're about to hit the top of the hour here. So what would, if for the athletes listening, like, what would be the number one most important thing for them to know about speed and that long-term athlete development?
That they can get faster with deliberate practice and consistency. So deliberate practice compounded with atomic habits, it can go a long way. So intent paired with consistency, you will get somewhere. You will. Hard work pays off. Just do it. Find a coach, sprint, or YouTube it, whatever. I got a lot of free content out there that goes over the general specifics, the basics, getting into a kneeling 2 point stance and accelerating, and then transitioning from acceleration to top speed. And we probably don't talk enough about that transition phase. When does the athlete, so I can get into the details on that, but just those general things, the three pillars: starts, acceleration, top speed. Work on that for a long period of time, you'll get faster. And then, if you need help, hit me up. I do virtual training as well. So just come contact me. Czar Athletics.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all in the show notes, all in the caption there, so definitely check out his links. He's on a lot of the socials, got the website, got everything for you guys. But yeah, coach, thanks so much for hopping on today. That was really good, and I liked how we progressed through that.
Yeah, I like that too. One is learning for me as well. I feel like it should be I like how you challenged me, and then I kind of asked you a question. I think that's how it should be. We should not say stump the dummy, but I would say if you have a question, we should ask the expert or uh, help us learn more because it's
Yeah.
a puzzle. I don't know everything, and I like to be challenged. Like you said, with going back to why, I tell my athletes, ask me why. Why am I doing this? And I always tell them, I said, if you ask me why and I don't have a good answer, I failed you, and I need to take that movement out of the session.
Yeah.
So hold me accountable. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, thanks again for hopping on. And athletes, like, remember what that last message from Coach Czar is like, keep doing it, be consistent, be intentional, and you will go a lot farther. Like, that's the thing, is just be freaking consistent. That's one of my favorite words as well. So be consistent, trust the process, and you will go a lot further than if you essentially give up. So remember that. And as always, keep striving for greatness.